Okay. I think we're ready to get at it. Ready? Oops. Let's wait a second here. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to my studio. My name is Michael Markowsky, and once again today we are going to attempt to recreate another one of my favorite paintings from one of the great masters of all time. We're going to be looking at Charles M. Schulz, Snoopy and the Red Baron from 1970-ish approximately here. Although the character Snoopy first appeared in 1952, the idea of the Red Baron and Snoopy is 1965, but I think this is from a few years after that here, this particular image. Just a little bit of, information about the work itself. I couldn't actually find information about this specific image, except it being used in like pillows and blankets and stuff, but I love this image, and he did many very similar ones. Here's another one that you could do. I'm not going to do two. I'm just going to try to focus on one painting today, but there's another one here that if you prefer to do this one, you could certainly swap out the outlines for it. In the chat there, let me see, what does that say? Apple just updated everything and now nothing works, right? Is anybody surprised? Not me. Upgrade to the latest operating system. Katie says, I saw the announcement there would be a new painting first thing this morning and I got so excited. I'm working today, but I'll listen in on my lunch hour. Thanks, Katie. And Sohel says, hello, sir. Katie says, Christmas drawings were so much fun. I hope to start painting this tonight. Have fun, everyone. Sohel says, I need to learn anatomy for drawing cartoons. Interesting. Well, anatomy when it comes to cartoons is... there's a lot of room for exploration there, let's say. Okay, in just a couple seconds, let's go through the plan of today's episode. In a moment, we're gonna talk about the scale of difficulty. And I kind of was just thinking yesterday, I think I want to change the name. I don't like scale of difficulty. I was thinking about scale of complexity, maybe. So you let me know in the chat if you have a better term for that step. Then we're going to talk about the materials required. We're going to do the image transfer, Imprimatura, or will we? Actually, I might do a few different things today to speed this one up, to make it as quick of a painting as possible. I don't know how much we'll talk about Charles M. Schulz's biography, because I've done 2 previous episodes focusing on him. I went into a great deal of depth, so I'm not sure how much more there is left for me to talk about. I got to pick my daughter up from school in 3 hours already. Oh my goodness. So yeah, we have to be done before then, that's for sure. Now before we get started, just a quick reminder to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you know when all these future episodes are taking place. And like Katie said, this was a bit of a spontaneous episode, so if you hit that notification bell, you'll be the first people to know when we're about to go live. If you want to leave a small donation, $1, $5 to help keep the lights on and the internet and all that kind of stuff, I would very much appreciate any support whatsoever, and thank you to those people who've supported the channel over the years. If you scan that QR code or enter in the web address, it'll take you to a page that looks just like this, where you can safely and securely donate to support the channel. If you would prefer to send an e-transfer through your bank or a check or money order in the mail, and you want my address or email address, all of those, the links to find that stuff is down there in the description below, including the Facebook group, which we'll talk about here in a moment, which has all of that information. And speaking of the Facebook group, here's the link to the Facebook group. You could scan the QR code or enter in one of these addresses. They're all going to the exact same place. And if you join the Facebook group, upload an artwork that you've created recently, and I'd love to talk about it and offer you some free bonus tips on how to potentially improve it, or often just celebrate your achievement, because I'm just constantly amazed with the amazing stuff that people like yourself are creating from all over the world. We're almost at 2,000 people part of that group, and it just grew organically from conversations here in the chat. So I'd love to see you participate in that. And I know sometimes it's a little bit scary to upload your work and share it with the world. So perhaps just join the group and just take inspiration from other people until you feel confident enough to share your work with the world. So it's time for the scale of complexity, maybe? Maybe I'm thinking of changing the name for this. You let me know what you think is best. So let's talk about how difficult today's painting is. And here's our scale going from a beginner to novice, intermediate, advanced, and then a master like Charles M. Schulz himself. So where would you fall along the line in this spectrum, and where does today's artwork fall? So a beginner, someone who's never painted or drawn before, never seen me ever before, doesn't know the first thing about anything we're about to talk about, I think this is the episode for you. If you're a novice who's done maybe the color wheel, watched a few episodes with me, and kind of understands when I talk about warm and cool colors, it's not too out of the blue, this should be fairly straightforward for you. Intermediate, I think you should be able to pull this off no problem, and even be able to keep up with me as we're painting along. Advanced, you should probably be able to do this while you go to sleep. Like, you should probably be able to get all of your paints out, because it's pretty hard to squeeze all the paints out when you're actually sleeping. But if you get all the paints out onto the palette, get the brushes kind of arranged neatly, then go to sleep. Just make sure you have like one arm kind of near the paints, or maybe even put a paintbrush in your hand before you fall asleep. And then you'll wake up in the morning, and because you're an advanced artist, it'll just be completed. And then if you're a master like Charles M. Schulz, you don't even need to touch the paintbrush. You kind of you can do this while you're sleeping, or while maybe meditating, maybe while you're watching a rerun of something you've seen a few times, right? So it doesn't take a lot of brain power. You just kind of just sit there, maybe do some yoga or meditate, and then you'll realize you don't even have to squeeze the paint out of the tube. It will get itself out of the tube and directly onto the canvas. That's the amazing thing about being a master. So, I would say today's painting is at the beginner end of things here. So if you've never painted with me before, you've never seen me before, and you're wondering who this weird guy is, today's a painting for you. And of course, you know, while I'm doing this live, and if you're watching me live, then you can watch along. But if you've just tuned in and this episode was recorded 10 years ago, then you can just jump to the end. There's timestamps below, and just go to the end and see if it turned out the way that you expected. And if so, then you're like, oh, maybe this guy knows what he's doing. Maybe I'll follow along. Okay. Christina says, hi, Michael. I was happy when I saw my notification about today's live episode 2. Your channel is currently vital in my mental health arsenal. So grateful for this community. Thank you, Christina. That's so sweet. Well, just so you know, these episodes are vital for my mental health as well. So this is, we're helping each other. We're supporting each other. That's the great thing with a community, right? I'm totally with you there. Vlatka says, I have just started your free online course doing Van Gogh's bedroom at the moment, and this pops out. Awesome. Well, thanks for saying hi, Vlatka. Awesome. Oh, I got some weird thing on my screen here. Okay, cool. But that's strange. It's always strange. Always something weird going on. Okay, let me just reload that. Technology. Come on. Weird. Okay. Now I think I've got it back working. Gosh. Okay. So, let's talk about the materials required to make today's painting. Now, I have done an entire hour-and-a-half long episode going into a great deal of depth about all of this. So I'm just going to try to summarize everything in about 5 quick minutes. So if you've never seen me before, then you can scan this QR code. It's totally free. You don't have to give me your email address. You don't have to do anything. Nobody will ever know, except I suppose Dropbox, that you went to this site and you downloaded this free PDF to your computer, to your phone, which you can then open up and print out or use on your phone while you're standing in an art supply store and find all the supplies and things that we're about to talk about here. But I'm just going to cover some of this stuff anyway. So we're about to paint with acrylic paint on a 9x12 sized canvas board. All right, I like this particular brand that you can, there's a link to this one in the description below from Amazon, but you could find canvas boards at your dollar store. I got these from Amazon. They work out to $2 a piece when you buy them in like 12 in a set or something. So I would suggest, if you've never painted before, you're probably going to want to use as inexpensive of materials as possible, or at least I encourage you to do so, so that the stakes are as low as possible. Are we going to use any of this? Not sure. I might use some gesso. I was thinking about that, but we'll see. Next up, I always expect to have a disaster, and so I always have a rag or two on hand, and I literally put this here just to remind myself to get this ready. If you're ready to have a spill, you probably won't have a spill. If you're not ready to have a spill, you are going to have a disaster. It's just the way the world works. So we're going to use a system of painting called the split primary palette. I didn't invent this, but I'm certainly on a mission to popularize it, because I think if everybody knew this method of painting, I think it should be taught in elementary schools. I think every kid around the world, by the time they're 10 years old, should be totally familiar with what I'm talking about. That's my goal for the next generation. My daughter, who's 6 years old, I want everyone her age to by the time they're 10, know this, just like they know how to spell and read and write their own name. Because it just makes so much sense. It simplifies things. Now, there are other systems, but this one I think is the best introductory method. And once you sort of get it, then all the other methods of painting become so much more straightforward. But 99% of every teacher, the way that I was taught growing up, jumps right to the most complex methods, and it gets so confusing. And most people don't have the patience to persevere through all that. So anyway, the reason why this is important is it focuses on a concept called color temperature. Every color has a temperature. Now, it doesn't mean that some tubes of paint have to be worn with oven mitts because they're so hot, and some you have to use tongs because they're so cold you don't want to get frostbite. It kind of follows along with like the way that color is measured in like Kelvin units, right? Every color has a Kelvin unit. And so we talk about colors having being warm or cool, and the reason why that's important is it helps you create the illusion of depth in a painting. a cool color will appear to recede into the background, whilst a warm color will appear to advance towards the viewer. So if you think of like a painting like a window, you want to, and you're looking through that window, you want the cool colors as far away from you and the warm colors as close to you. Right? I often think of it as like a campfire, that the warm colors are close to you, and then the further you get from the campfire, the cooler it gets. Right? So this also helps you mix the colors you want, because all you got to do is ask yourself, where is the color in this photograph? Is it in the mountains in the background? Okay, cool colors. Let's use the cool colors. Is it on the face of the person standing right in the middle of the canvas? Probably warm colors. There are exceptions, especially over the last 100 years, artists who really played with these concepts. But for the most part, they hold up pretty darn well. And I've done 387. This is the 388th episode using this. And you can go back and see how they work and decide for yourself. So I'm about to use a brand of paint called Amsterdam Paint. Now, I'm not sponsored by them. I haven't been given any free paint. No free vacations or anything. But I do think this is the best bang for the buck. You get the most amount of paint, the highest quality paint, for the least amount of money. There are higher quality paints that are 2, 3, 4 times the price, that are like maybe 20%, 10% better. But there's also paint that's more expensive and less expensive that are like 1/10 the quality. So just putting that out there. So I really like this brand, but if you want to use other brands, here's what I would suggest you use for all these different brands. So I'm just going to fire through these really quickly. Again, you can pause the screen and do a screenshot, or just download the PDF that's free there from the Dropbox folder. The Solitude Soul says, "Hello, you amazing artist. How's everything? I wanted to ask you about your thoughts on abstract geometry art, especially the ones that were popular in the 1930s to 50s. Oh, good question. Okay, let me get to that in a second. So I went through all those, and you'll see there's a few here paints that I do not recommend, such as Museum Color, Peebo, Mary's, and Fevicryl. I haven't used Fevicryl or Mary's, but I have used Peebo and Museum Color, and none of these work because they put way too much white as a filler in these paints, and it means it's impossible to mix our own black. And as you'll see, I'm going to mix my own black, although I do have a tube of black paint. I've had this single tube of black paint for 5 years, and there's still lots of paint left. I think of black as like a fire extinguisher, right? Or a fire alarm. You only need it in case of an emergency. Every paint company puts a little bit of white in their colors to give them a little bit more opacity, because I think people think opacity means better quality paint, which is, there's literally no connection whatsoever. But Museum Color and Peebo do a lot. You'll notice pretty much every very cheap paint, like this Mary's and Fevicryl, anything you find at your dollar store has a lot of white, which is great if you're doing a lot of pastel stuff, but just know that it has very low saturation in terms of color. So the Solitude Soul's question about geometric abstract artworks. We have done a number of artworks by, we've done at least one Mondrian painting. We've done a few of them. There was a period of time where I did a lot of paintings using a lot of tape to get really hard, sharp edges, this kind of sharp-edged abstract painting style. So I have a great deal of respect for that approach to painting. I'm not sure what to say about it. It is very different. Not everybody's cup of tea. I totally acknowledge that. But I do think that, and that's one of the things I'm trying to do here, is that trying an approach to painting that maybe you don't like, or that you have some reservations about, at least in my experience, it gives me a whole new level of respect for those methods and techniques. And just because you try it doesn't mean you have to use it forever going forward. But sometimes it's just kind of good to know, oh, that's interesting. That's good to know that exists, right? And I put that concept, put it in my back pocket in case I ever need it in the future. So, yeah. I think there's still plenty of room for exploration in terms of abstraction and geometric abstraction, for sure. I don't know if that answers your question, my friend. Okay. How do you say this username? My username is not found. Okay, my username is not found. Hi, Michael. I just finished drawing Superman from your drawing courses. Want to thank you for your drawing courses. I really appreciate them. Thank you so much, my friend. I appreciate that. Well, hopefully, as you go forward, you might be able to find your username. Okay, awesome. Thanks for sharing that, for jumping into the chat. Yeah, and feel free to join the Facebook group, upload the artwork you've been working on. I'd love to celebrate it in a future episode of our free bonus feedbacks, which I do about once every month and a half or so. Okay, let's get back onto the horse. Let's sip some tea. Okay. So, the first thing I want to do, or I might, well, let's talk about it, is look at the image that we're going to eventually paint here and where you can find the free downloadable template. So, if you scan this QR code there on your screen, or you enter in that web address, it's going to take you to the free Dropbox folder. And again, you don't have to give me your email. You don't have to pay me anything. You don't have to, no one will know that you were there. You could be the President of the United States, and no one will know that you are secretly making a painting of Snoopy, right? If you are, Mr. Trump, we would love to see your Snoopy painting. I'm sure everybody would be fascinated to see how you did. So if you scan that QR code, it's going to take you to a folder that looks just like this. The supply guide that I mentioned earlier is right at the top of the page there. You can download that free PDF. And then you'll see here's the resources for the first few episodes, learning about the color wheel, talking about color, temperature, doing the value scale. And then, I don't know, we got another 400 or so folders. Some of these folders have like a dozen paintings inside them. So plenty to keep you busy. So, I mean, here's Leonardo da Vinci. Here's the Mona Lisa in here. Who's another name you might be familiar with? Joan Mitchell, the abstract painter. Not Joni Mitchell, the Canadian singer, but Joan Mitchell was an American painter who had a relationship with a Canadian painter, Jean-Paul Riopel, who himself is right up there. Jean-Michel Basquiat. Anyway, let's crawl further up here. They're all organized by first name and then last name. So Charles M. Schulz, Charlie Brown. We click in here. You're going to see there's 3 subfolders. We've got Charlie Brown Christmas, Charlie Brown and Snoopy. Those were episodes we did last month, right before Christmas, that Katie was talking about in the chat earlier. And then here's our Snoopy and the Red Baron folders. So let's click in here. You'll see that there's 2 artworks that you could do that we mentioned before. And for each of those artworks, I did a tracing on my iPad Pro using the Procreate app. And you'll see there's a JPEG version and a PDF version. Both free to download and print. Some people prefer to print from the PDFs. You know, if you're at work, sometimes that's easier. But they're all identical, right? So feel free to choose the one you want to paint. And we'll get started here. Christine says, was watching your old mother and child Klimt episode and Edie popped into finger paint. So cute, but also hilarious. Yes. I do have a few, there's a couple things, where it's actually probably about 10 episodes her and I have recorded together that I mean to kind of somehow edit or put out somehow. So, she's a big kid. That's 6.5 now. Time flies, folks. Okay, so, what was I going to do here? So, typically, what I do here is I trace this onto the canvas to get started. I was laying in bed last night trying to think about how I wanted to approach this. And I was thinking about maybe just going right in and painting the background blue. Just to save some time. So I think that's what I'm... Although, you know what? Okay. So... this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to set this up. Put some tape here. There's the website. Oh, I should mention that typically, so these canvases come wrapped in plastic. I take them out of the plastic, and then I give it a sanding with some 100 grit sandpaper that takes some of the tooth, the texture off, and then I apply some white acrylic gesso over top of the surface, and I just let it drip onto some newsprint. You know, put a little piece of tape measure or cup underneath. The paint drips off the side. I let it dry overnight, and then I sand it again the next day with some 100 grit sandpaper again, and I get a much smoother surface to draw on. It makes painting so much easier. And so often when I'm flipping this, I'm just always double checking. I can just see fingerprints from white and sometimes little drips on the edges. So I just wanted to point that out as well. Again, talking about all about gessoing and all that preparation, that's all in that the first episode where I talk about materials and stuff. So if you're curious about what gesso? What does that mean? Then you can watch that episode just to kind of get a little bit of a heads up on that. Now, I think what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to very quickly outline like this, so that I have a general idea of where the paint, the blue, is going to go. So I'm gonna redo that image transfer process in a little bit later here. So let's jump to so often what I do at this step is something called the Imprimatura. It's a stain that we put on the surface of the canvas to get it started. And artists have been staining the canvas with either a brown, a green, a yellow, an orange, blue, purple, fluorescent pink, any color really you want. To get a painting started throughout history. It's less common today than it ever was, but in the Western world, this was since the beginning of the Renaissance, or even before that, was one of the primary steps. Now, I'm not going to do that for this painting, but if you're watching me for the first time, and later on you watch another episode, and you're like, hey, we didn't do that. What on earth is he doing? I just want you to know that this is typically a step I do, but I think just for the sake of speed, I'm going to skip over it today. So what I'm going to do instead, I'm going to jump right to my background layer number 1, and I'm going to take care of that right off the top, so that I've got Yeah, I'm kind of doing something a little bit different than I typically do here. So I'm going to apply a coat of blue across the whole painting. I've left a little bit of outline of where my the main shapes here, Snoopy and his doghouse or Sopwith camel, is, and so I'm just going to basically paint over all of this. Maybe not go. I don't need to waste paint inside here too much. But let's now take a look at the painting and just talk about the color here, because we're going to try to mix this blue. So this blue that we're looking at here, I would say is a blue that exists both, it's kind of between our warm and cool colors. I typically suggest using cool color in the background and warm color in the foreground. However, this particular artwork has kind of a, I wouldn't say a neutral, but it might even be closer to warm blue. So I would say this is the color that probably the technical name for that color is a cobalt blue, and cobalt blue is like halfway between the ultramarine blue that I usually like using for my as a warm blue, and it's halfway between my cool blue, my primary cyan, or a cerulean blue, right? There's lots of different kinds of warm and blue colors. I tried to find two blues that are about as far away from one another on the color wheel as possible. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to mix a little bit of this together. You know, now that I see them on the screen, it does, you know, now it's feeling maybe a little bit cooler, but I think whatever one I choose here, I think is going to be fine. If you wanted to simplify your life, you could just choose, let's say, the cool blue and be done with it. But you'll see I put a fairly substantial amount of paint on there because I don't want to run out of paint halfway through here. And have to remix that color and ultimately end up using way more paint, right? So this is a way of saving paint ultimately, and also having a bit of extra color to use as a background can be kind of handy if something happens. You spill your coffee on it and you're frantically dabbing up that and it wipes away the paint and you're like, ah, now my background's ruined. If you've got a little bit of extra paint here, then it's not such a problem. Another thing is it's quite likely, in fact, I'm now thinking maybe I need more paint, because sometimes, almost always, you need 2 layers of paint. And so my worry is I have certainly enough to do 1 layer of paint here, but if I have to do a second layer, is there enough to do 2 layers if I need it, right? And one of the things I do is, if I've got leftover paint, then I do this. Here's this painting we did after Jay DeFeo. She was a abstract painter in New York in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and she did this we did this painting here, but you can see how thick that is, right? Look how goopy. You can see my fingers. Look how deep these are, right? And so at the end of every episode, I've got leftover paint. I just splatter it on here, and it just keeps getting bigger and bigger. And that's what Jay DeFeo did until eventually, when she sold that painting, they had to take the wall off of the outside of her New York City apartment and use a crane, because it weighed like a ton or more, to get it out of the house. They couldn't take it down the stairs. It was too heavy. Anyway, so if I got leftover paint, I'm going to add it to my Jay DeFeo painting. So I'm looking at this. I feel, well, let's mix up the color and we'll get a sense. So I put a little bit of that warm blue in there. Let's take a look at those colors side by side. Now it might look kind of dark or darker than the original, than the image on the left. I'm a little worried I'm going to run out. I'm going to put, let's put a bit more paint in here. So you can see how transparent that paint ultimately is. I could have put a little bit of white in here. That would have lightened it up a little bit and made it more opaque. But I personally want this pretty deep blue. So now I'm going over top of my pencil lines. I got a hair or something in here. Wow, that's a really stubborn hair. Usually they come out a little bit easier than that. Okay, I'm gonna blow dry this. So I'm just gonna mute the audio for a moment. Okay, so one thing I want you to notice is look how kind of patchy this color is. Now, I think some of these much darker areas are where the paint is still a little bit wet, like where it's a little bit thicker. But I do think that when it dries, those dark areas won't be so dark, but they'll still be a little bit darker. So one of the things that would have helped is probably adding a little bit of white. I could add more white now, but then I'm afraid I might have some areas that are kind of a little bit patchy in the opposite way, because I've got, you know, two areas that are a little bit have too much white versus not enough. And you can see here, I think I'm gonna have just barely enough paint now to do this second coat. So I'm gonna spread my paint out so that I've got it roughly covered. We're just barely gonna have enough here, and I'm even then a little bit worried it's gonna be a bit streaky, but we'll see. Okay, so I've got maybe 10 more seconds to do this, and then I gotta quit because the paint is starting to dry. When it starts to dry, I start to see kind of, it starts to pull the paint, and that can make for some kind of unhappy kind of, it sort of looks like if you leave milk out to dry overnight, and then you get that kind of skin. You'll see that to kind of form here, so I think that's good. Okay, so just before I move on, I'm going to try to consolidate my leftover paint, right? So remember when I was like, I got lots and I'll paint my J DeFeo with extra paint? Pfft, I just made it here. That's another reason why I like just using inexpensive paint. Because if I was using a tube of paint and that amount of paint cost me $10, I'd be like, oh man, that's a lot of paint I'm using here. Like right now, that's maybe $1's worth of paint I've put on this canvas so far. And so if this painting doesn't turn out well, I'm like, well, I put $3 worth of paint in it. And so, what are you gonna do? It's like I spilt the cup of coffee on the sidewalk. Right? Not great, but not the end of the world. I was like, I know there's something I'm forgetting, and I forgot to get some water, so I'm just gonna run to the sink and grab some water real quick. Yeah, my daughter and I, we went to the Vancouver Art Gallery yesterday, and we were drawing together in the gallery, brought our sketchbooks, and spent a couple of hours drawing paintings. I mean, there are kind of fun, silly, weird paintings, but it's more fun to draw a painting while while you're there in person looking at it than just sitting at the coffee table at home, right? Okay, I'm going to blow dry this again. Okay, so, I blow dried there for a couple of minutes, and even then I can still see where it's wet. I'm trying to hold it up here so maybe you can see as well. See how it's very reflective in some areas, like in and around here and here? That's where the paint is a little bit thicker. And so when this paint is more dry, it'll go more matte. That's why I like always using matte mediums, whether glazing fluid or slow dry medium, whatever it is. I like it when it's matte or satin as opposed to glossy or shiny, because if you use shiny mediums, then it's hard to tell, is my paint wet or is it just the gloss coming off? Because acrylic paint, when it's wet, is always glossy, but when it dries, it goes matte. So this helps me identify whether my paint is wet or dry or not. And it is very helpful to know when the acrylic paint is still wet. Probably should have put a little bit of white in that paint. It's still a little bit streaky. Even if I had put 5% white in there, it wouldn't have altered the color substantially, but I would have had a more solid overall color. But you live and you learn, right? There is a thing in my mind, well, let's do the other, I'll do another one, I'll add white, and we'll do both Snoopy paintings today. And then I'm like, you know what? That's asking for trouble, because then I probably won't finish both of them in time. I could probably finish one before I gotta go pick my daughter up. Barbara says, hi, y'all. I'm baking cookies this evening, so I'll watch in the background. It's 8 p.m. here. Oh, I wonder what kind of cookies you're making. I almost late last night decided to start baking cookies, and I'm like, you know what? Maybe I should just go to bed and think about it. Because I know if I bake a batch of cookies before bed, I'm going to eat most of them. And then in the morning, you're like, that was crazy. What were you thinking? Baking cookies at midnight. Okay. Ideally, so I can even feel this is still wet because it's kind of tacky. And that's because that's area where the paint was thicker than I would have liked it to be, because this is right where Snoopy's going to be. So it's actually where I was planning on painting some white paint right now. It's not the end of the world to paint on top of it, but I don't want to activate this paint while it's still drying. But yeah, you'll see there was, I don't know how much, what would be the equivalent amount of paint I put on here. I think it's something to compare it to. I'd say it was like almost about a roll of quarters worth of paint that I just applied on there. So that's a lot of paint. And so for it to dry, you know, I'm spreading it out. That helps speed up the drying time. But any other place there that paint builds up, I'm just going to try blow drying again for another minute and see if that helps. Okay, it's still a little bit wet. I mean, you can still see there's bits of, especially on the edges where it's still wet, so. But that definitely speeds up the drying time dramatically. Like if I didn't use a hairdryer, that could easily take an hour or more to dry. So one of the reasons I'm also wanting to wait here is I want to do a image transfer, and I don't like it when this is wet because it can stick to the carbon paper. So what would be the way to do this then? How could I do I just want to chance it? See where it's dry? Zero tack. Now it's starting to dry, but I can still feel. Okay, well, let's go forward anyway, and potentially we're probably going to run into some issues, but maybe that's a good thing for people to see how I overcome a problem as it arises. I know people sometimes like they like seeing me fall flat on my face and then try to figure a way out of the problem. Okay. Yeah, let's just do it. Let's just commit to it and do it. So, just so we all know, I'm expecting this carbon paper to stick to the canvas a little bit. So, in order to kind of prevent that, I'm just going to try to keep my fingers. So I don't want to press too much in the middle. Oops. Right now I'm just going to go around the outer edge here. I'm going to paint everything under this white. So there's no point in doing all the details like Snoopy's smile, because it's just going to get covered up with white paint. Let's do the explosions as well. So by trying to keep my fingers off the carbon paper, not pushing on the carbon paper, I decrease the likelihood that I'm going to get fingerprints transferring onto the blue here. So it's kind of tricky to draw when you can't get your fingers on the main picture itself. In fact, maybe I'll just show. In fact, I'm gonna press deliberately in a few places in the middle of Snoopy's face. Let's see if I can kind of force this problem to arise. All right, so now I'm gonna deliberately kind of rub a bit. So now let's peel this off, just so you can see what happened. Okay, so if you can see this is where I was pushing with my fingers down in the middle of Snoopy's face while I was tracing the outline, and we can see that there's a couple of spots where even down here my finger was there. Darn it. I'm using a kneadable eraser, which is the most fun eraser ever invented, which is the great thing with a kneadable eraser means you can knead it like pizza dough, right? Or cookies, right? If you're making them like Barbara. But it also doesn't leave any residue. And it's working really well here, but I think that's because this is a really dark surface. If this is a white canvas and I was trying to do this, I'd see a bit of success, but not nearly. This is kind of disguising how terrible that problem could be, right? I have a pretty dark background to begin with. Okay. So I was having this thought about maybe painting this with gesso as opposed to white paint. Where's my gesso? Okay, so let's do another. Senga says, "Hi everyone, Happy New Year." Hi, Senga. Oh, and Barbara says, "I'm making peanut and raisin cookies, low sugar for a diabetic husband." That's the opposite problem I have. I have low blood, high sugar. I have more sugar in my bloodstream than blood. I have a sugar stream with a little bit of blood. Okay, so So now that I've got my background established, I'm going to do a foreground layer. And I was thinking about, I could just apply white in all the different places where Snoopy and the explosion stuff are. Or I could try using a little bit of gesso. So gesso is what's on the canvas before I painted on it. If you buy pre-stretched canvas or pre-gessoed canvases, it's already got gesso on it. Gesso is essentially your acrylic paint plus maybe a little bit of titanium white, as well as like plaster powder that keeps. It's essentially what it's doing is it's like if you're patching a wall in your house. It's trying to. Isn't this fun? Look at this skin on here. So it's very opaque. The one thing is gesso right out of this is pretty thick. And if I thought this took a while to dry, I'm a little worried. So I also have this container full of gesso that I put water in. But I'm wondering, and I use this to gesso my canvases, but I wonder if this is now the opposite. It's a little bit too thin. Well, you never know if something works until you try it and you find out, right? So I think that's my only option, is just to jump feet first into the deep end, and then you guys can be the beneficiary of my success or failure. I also wondered maybe I should do what? Okay, how could I do this in show? We could have. I could do Snoopy and the doghouse with gesso, and paint the clouds with white. How about I'm going to try painting Snoopy in the doghouse with gesso, and I'm going to paint some of the clouds with gesso and some of them with just white. So that, because if I do them, then it can be hard to compare, but I can compare the clouds side by side. One thing with gesso is look at the texture. Oh my goodness, what am I doing here? Michael, what are you doing? Okay. So that's covering. So I'm trying to go up and even a little bit over top of these edges a bit, because there's that black from the carbon paper. I also don't like the amount of texture that's forming here. One thing, I don't want to scare anybody away who's just starting painting. What I do want you to recognize, though, is that I think one of the funnest things about painting is an opportunity to experiment and to play and to try different things and to come up with your own weird ways of working. Like, one of my favorite things about painting is there aren't really any rules. I mean, people will try to come up with them, and they'll try as best as they can to enforce them. But artists are, it's like herding cats. You will never get artists to agree on anything. Oops, maybe I should take it out of the way. So I'm just using my diluted gesso. It's probably got maybe 30% water in here. I'm going to go over all of these lines with regular titanium white paint later on. So I'm just using this to, it's sort of like, I don't know, I guess like kills, if you're familiar with that for paint. I mean, I literally have, like, we could try using kills too. And some of my pencil lines are really hard to see here. The great thing with this painting too is we're going to outline everything with black at the very, very end. So if some of these edges are a little bit messy, we can clean them up pretty easy with either a Posca pen or just black outline with a paintbrush. So I can't really see my pencil lines, graphite lines in this area here. I could have, after I did the transfer, just go around and with a regular pencil and just try to bring them, make them a little bit clearer to help with this step, but again, I'm not super concerned with that. Okay, Snoopy's tail. Ah! It's more than I wanted to use here. Okay, let's do some clouds now. So I genuinely have no idea which one will is just white. Is white gesso good as a base layer but beneath some white, or can we just jump right to white? And I'm totally open to any of these being correct. Like, if it turns out that the gesso makes a major difference, then it's like, wow, that's an awesome lesson to have learned. I'm also open to the possibility that gesso makes literally no difference. And then this thing that I've been thinking about for years is like, yeah, I tried it. You know what? Doesn't make a difference. There's no point. Doesn't make any difference. So now, just before I walk away from this, I'm just going around. You can see where it's still really wet. Just trying to remove texture, because when this gesso dries, it can leave some pretty strong raised areas. And sometimes that can be really cool. But sometimes it can really interfere with the rest of the painting. Like, it can look like there was something underneath. Okay, so there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more clouds. I'll just do those in regular white, titanium white, so we can see the difference here, if it makes any difference. Al-Hassan Baba Abdullah says, watching from Ghana, I'm taking your drawing class, and it's fun. That's so cool. I love that you're watching from Ghana right now. That's so neat. Thank you, my friend. Wow. I love it. Let me know how it goes. Join our Facebook group. Share what you've been creating. Let's celebrate your creative journey. I love it. Awesome. Thank you, my friend. I gotta make sure these lids are on properly, especially for paint that I might only use 2 or 3 times a year. I mean, there's not a lot left in there, so... And I got to gesso a bunch of new canvases anyways. I'll keep these handy. Okay. So what do you think? Do you think it's going to make much of a difference at all that a gesso is a base layer? Or do you think the titanium white is just is good enough? I literally have no clue. Oh, you know what? Let me just see. Oh, interesting. That goes on. So this is my titanium white. Dare I say it's already more opaque in the first layer? Wow, okay. Interesting. Well, it looks more opaque at the moment than my gesso. But you don't want to go make judgments too quick because acrylic paint can change as it dries. That's another reason why I love doing these episodes, just for me personally, is it helps me problem solve things, and I learn things, and I realize, you know, I test stuff that I can use later on in my own artwork. Should we do a few more clouds here? Let's put a few more clouds in here. How about another one? And maybe I'm just going to zoom in to demonstrate how I'm doing this for someone. So how about, where should we put another one? Should we go right up to the corner? Let's do one in the corner. So I just want you to see there's one there. Had a little bit of paint splatter there, so I'm just gonna add a little one around the edge. Do I want... Like, I don't want it to be an overall pattern. That might be good. Let's just zoom out. I don't want them to be perfectly spaced out. Sometimes it's nice to have a few that are grouped together. I'm just wondering, should I put one down here? One here. Tempted to put something else up here. Put a little one up here. Okay, maybe that's enough. Okay, I'm gonna blow dry all of this. And then we'll do a second layer of it. Let's use some tape again. Okay, so I'm going to paint over, I'm going to start with my clouds again. And I can't even really remember which ones were gessoed and not, so I'm pretty sure this is one I know was gessoed, and that one I know was acrylic. So I think that one I know is also gessoed. So I'm just going to go over them all. and paint them again with just acrylic paint this time. And ideally they're all going to be now dark enough that I don't need to do a third layer, hopefully. Again, I'm not really worried at all about making really beautiful clean edges here with these clouds or any part of this painting, because I'm going to go around it and outline it all with black. So as long as the solidity of these colors, the opacity I mean, is where I want it, that's good enough. I mean, it is looking like a third layer would be really nice. You know, I could have skipped this by just very carefully painting my whole background with blue and painting around all of these shapes. And while that might seem like more efficient at the moment, if we were to try to do them side by side, you know, I would still be painting blue right now. Very carefully going around all my edges. I always find when it comes to painting, there's no real good shortcuts. There's always every method has its pros and cons, and things that work a little bit faster, and you save time here, but then you got to make up for that time later on. And my thinking though is that this would ultimately lead to the most overall the cleanest kind of finish, with the least amount of kind of brushy, fiddly work in and around edges. I know this would certainly not be the way that lots of other artists would approach this painting, and that's fine. I mean, even myself, when I'm putting together the episode, I'm like, what is the best method? What is the fastest method? you'll probably notice that this scarf is ultimately going to be red. The doghouse will ultimately be red as well. So there's going to be a bunch of these. A lot of this is going to be repainted, and it won't ultimately be white either. And those colors have a bit of opacity as well, so there's still enough paint in here for me to finish this painting, even though I couldn't squeeze any out of the jar. I couldn't. So it's a good reminder that there's often way more paint stuck in those tubes than you might expect there to be. Okay, I'm gonna go back over. Hopefully, I'll just need to do this last layer here. I should also say, like, as I'm painting this, my lines aren't perfect, and they keep kind of expanding, and the outlines get bigger. Snoopy's nose is going to be bigger than when it began. That's okay. Again, even though this area is going to be red, I find red to be very transparent. So if I can kind of hide any of this blue, any little bit less of that coming through is just going to make this look cleaner and more precise. And so I would say, long story short, at least from my observations right now, you might be able to see something different that I'm not seeing, is that it really makes no difference whether I'm using just titanium white or acrylic gesso to as like a white substitute, especially in these initial layers. I mean, I was pretty convinced that the gesso would be way more opaque. And I guess I wasn't using the gesso at full strength. I was using a diluted version of it. So that will also dramatically affect the opacity. That's for sure. Okay, I'm going to blow dry this, and I'm almost out of this white paint. I do have other white paint, but it's kind of, I want to see if I can just use this up on this one paint. So I'm going to blow dry it, maybe just a couple little touch-ups, and then I'm going to move on. So I think this is a fourth layer on top of things here. At this point, though, I'm only putting it in places where the final layer is going to be white. So there are all these little bits of white that came off my fingers as I'm painting. I'm just going to let them sit there. I'm going to blow dry the painting. They should all just blow right off, as opposed to trying to pick them off with my dirty fingers and smearing white in the background and then getting all panicky about how to solve that problem. You don't want to make problems trying to fix problems, right? Okay, maybe I am just gonna go wash my hands really quick so I don't cause any future issues. Be right back. So it wasn't really the paint that I was trying to clean off. You still see blue still on my fingers. It's the gesso. Gesso is because the the white that's in gesso is much coarser, larger chunks, as I spit on my painting here. And that, when it gets on your fingers, you know, it's like, it becomes almost like sand, right? And you get this kind of grit, and then that just starts to flake off and fall into the paint and just cause problems. Again, if there's any little things that have fallen on the painting, like those little bits from my fingers, I want the painting to be nice and dry, so when I'm picking at it, I'm not smearing paint. But also, if it's dry, often it'll just kind of, it just falls right off. Even if it's like a hair or something that's stuck in the surface, you can just pull it right out. If it's wet, though, it might pull out, and then it leaves texture, and it can just be a total nightmare. So it's always about patience. Barbara says, bacon cookies, no time to paint. The cookies are in the oven. The cookies are in the oven. Ladies and gentlemen. The crowd waits in anticipation of the cookies. Sangus says, I made a few batches of cookies and apple pie. Oh, apple pie. You guys, it's the new year. I'm trying to cut back on all this stuff. And the chat's all about cookies and pies. Okay, 17 minutes. T-minus 17 minutes until scalding hot cookies come out of the oven. And I'm one of those persons who will eat the cookie in its most mouth burning state right off the pan. Okay. Let's. How much time? Okay. I think we'll do just a protracted. Okay. Now, usually I do this part of the episode much earlier in the episode, but because I wanted to kind of get everything set up, so then all I have to do is just focus on painting at the end here. I want to talk very briefly about Charles M. Schulz and the Snoopy character and the Red Baron, and why I'm so fascinated by this, and why of all of the Peanuts characters I wanted to do a painting about Snoopy. So, if anything. Right, so Charles M. Schulz, born in 1922, lives a very prolific, productive, celebrated life, dies at the age of 77 in the year 2000. One of the most important comic book creators of all time. His comic strip Peanuts, in which featured Charlie Brown and Snoopy and a whole other cast of characters, is arguably the single most successful comic strip of all time in publishing history, set all sorts of records, and he drew that comic book from 1952 or cartoon strip in the newspapers from 1952 when it first began until literally a couple days before, or really the day, I think a couple days before he died. And the last strip was published, I think, the day after he died. So, and I think there's all sorts of stories about his commitment. Like, I think he took one single holiday during his entire life. I think they went to Hawaii, where he took like a week off. And I think he called it sort of like the most stressful week of his life. He wasn't able to relax. So it just goes to show you, I mean, this guy's like basically a workaholic, or just somebody who really loved what he was doing. And for him, making these characters and comics was fun. It wasn't like he's toiling in a coal mine, you know, day after day, and it was like terrible labor that he hated doing. He loved doing it, so the idea of taking a break from it was like, well, this is what I do for love, right? So 1952, Peanuts makes its first appearance. Snoopy is one of those first characters in that very first comic strip. And originally when Snoopy appears, is there any kind of info here on Wikipedia? Originally when Snoopy appeared, the character was very, very simple, and basically walked on all four legs like a typical dog would. Didn't really do much except just be Charlie Brown's faithful companion. Sort of hang out next to him, sit next to him, smile with him, keep him company when he was upset. But gradually, as the cartoon evolved, Snoopy got more and more developed as a character, and began to take over became arguably the most rich, most emotionally rich, most deep psychologically of all the characters in the Peanuts expanded universe. In that all of the other characters had lives and kind of backstories, parents, and but they are all kind of bound by the world in which they lived. You know, they're little kids growing up, dealing with things little kids deal with, often also exploring a little bit more adult subject matter too, like love and loss, death, all that kind of stuff. But for the most part, they're fairly straightforward. I mean, probably, I guess, Charlie Brown, besides Snoopy, would have been the most complex character. People often talk about Charlie Brown and Snoopy as being kind of like yin and yang kind of characters. Charlie Brown being kind of controlled by his fears and worries, while Snoopy, as he developed, became more and more confident, more fearless, more assertive. So Charles M. Schulz talked about how kind of Charlie Brown was kind of like himself, kind of a shy kid who struggled in school and was, afraid of all sorts of things in his world, whereas Snoopy was kind of like his ideal personality. And none is no more so than when Snoopy inhabits the persona of the World War I flying ace that we're painting today, in which he goes into his imaginary world and sees himself in a one-on-one duel against the Red Baron, Baron Manfred von Richthofen, the German World War I flying ace who flew in a do I have anything about the Red Baron here? Let's just bring up the good old Red Baron here. The Red Baron was kind of seen as both like the most frightening symbol of German imperial power in World War I, and also kind of like one of the most respected combatants in the war. There was this idea of fighter pilots in World War I being kind of like knights in shining armor. I mean, the planes that they were flying in World War I were basically like lawnmowers with wings. I mean, pretty rudimentary. I mean, you're talking like the Wright brothers had only flown like at Kitty Hawk like a decade before, and then all of a sudden World War II, you have them flying around doing dogfights. Being a fighter pilot in World War I was one of, if not the most dangerous role that you could have during World War I, because many of the times the pilots didn't even have parachutes because of the weight those parachutes had and how kind of rudimentary these planes were. They just couldn't hold that much weight, so any extra weight was jettisoned. So these pilots, if they got shot and the plane started to spin out of control, that was it. They could try to make a soft landing, but so the vast majority of people who flew these planes in World War I died in combat, and including the Red Baron himself. And of course, there's the age-old question as to who shot the Red Baron down. There's been dispute. Maybe it was an Australian guy shooting from the ground. Maybe it was a Canadian pilot who was in the air at that exact moment. But I just want to make sure my audio is on there. But anyway, the Red Baron took on this legendary, mythological quality during World War II, and then subsequently after, gaining more and more esteem as the years passed. I think all sorts of things. I mean, the fact that he died under kind of semi-mysterious circumstances only led to the legend of this person. The fact that he died in combat meant that he left very little kind of... it's not like he was able to retire and write his memoirs and talk about all the different kind of people he went up against and all that kind of stuff. So it's in the same sort of way like I'm writing a graphic novel about the Canadian artist Tom Thompson, who died kind of unexpectedly and mysteriously, and so we don't really know how he died, and that's a big part of the... Oops, that's weird. And that's a big part of the mystery about and what maybe attracts people originally to Tom Thompson as an artist. Anyway, one thing about the whole Red Baron as it appears in the Peanuts cartoons, and specifically in these in the comic strips or television appearances, is we actually never see the Red Baron ever once in anything authored by Charles M. Schulz. The Red Baron is always this kind of existential combatant that shoots up Snoopy's doghouse. We see bullet holes appear on the side of the doghouse, and definitely, as they do their cartwheels in the air. But we never actually see the plane. We never see the figure of the Red Baron. And so, in some ways, the Red Baron is kind of like that. For us, is that kind of unknowable, invisible force that we all sometimes find ourselves up against. Feelings, especially when you're a kid, feelings that you can't express or explain, frustrations that you can't externalize. And so I think Snoopy and the Red Baron evokes this both the imagination of children and how rich the imagination can be in the world of children. I mean, for all of us, but in particularly kids. Kids come up with imaginary friends and stuff. But also kind of sometimes that the intangible forces, when you're a little kid, like I have my 6-year-old daughter has autism and is currently non-speaking, And so there is this, she has a whole inner world that is totally beyond my access, right? I don't know what she's thinking or feeling or dreaming about all the time. And so, I think of like the Red Baron is kind of, she has lots of Red Barons who are there, but she can't touch or describe, but they're frustrations for her. When I was a kid, the Snoopy was by far my favorite character in the Peanuts universe. Whenever, like, so for instance, there is a kind of an epic battle, a prolonged scene in The Great Pumpkin Charlie Brown. It's The Great Pumpkin Charlie Brown, the cartoon. I was just rewatching this morning, and essentially the Great Pumpkin is, there's all these the kids, Charlie Brown and all his friends, they get dressed up to go trick-or-treating, and one of them, I think it's Linus, is obsessed with trying to see the Great Pumpkin appear in the pumpkin patch. And so there's the little kids in their world of Halloween, and they're going about this activity, and the kind of the main side story to that is Snoopy taking on the Red Baron. He dresses up like everybody else, but while everyone else is marching door to door getting candy, Snoopy takes on the serious role of taking on the Red Baron. And so he's flying, and he starts up his plane and he flies around, and of course we assume he encounters the Red Baron. There's a shootout, and eventually Snoopy crashes behind enemy lines, and then he's got to kind of crawl under barbed wire and through trenches and hide out in abandoned, ruined castles until he makes it home again. And it's kind of a little bit of this. There's a seriousness to, it's absurd. Of course, it's totally absurd because he's flying around on his doghouse. It's not, he doesn't have wings, there's no steering wheel, there's no propeller. The whole thing is clearly in his imagination. But it's also kind of, there's, one senses almost that Snoopy is, he kind of exists in a different realm where he's not just going trick-or-treating, he is keeping the world safe. He's taking on the biggest mythical bad guy in history, and manages to survive to fight again another day. So there's an absurdity to it, a silliness, but there's also some kind of psychological weight to this whole thing that I've always found super fascinating. And I remember, just watching Snoopy kind of get dressed up with his goggles, scarf, and that encouraged me as a little kid to be playful in the same way, and recognizing you didn't have to have an airplane or a model or build something in order to go on these imaginary adventures. You could just sit on a doghouse with a scarf and, project your mind into this world. You didn't need all this extra artifice and costumes in order to have an imaginary adventure. And I always thought that was, just gave me permission as a little kid to be as wild in an imaginative way as possible. That there weren't any restrictions. I didn't have to have certain things in place in order, like, because I went to like a private school at one point when I was a kid, and there were kids who had a lot of money and who had like giant mansions, like huge mansions on the outskirts of town. One of whom I remember his family was featured in a National Geographic magazine. talking about like the wealth of Western Canada, and this was one of my best friends, and obviously like he had, you know, all sorts of incredible toys to kind of take him on these journeys, whereas I had to kind of, like, for instance, I'll just show you an example here. If I can find it, where is it? For instance, this is a little tank that my dad, I think my dad or my grandfather built me when I was a little kid. I still have this thing around the house. And it's just made of 2x4s and paint, and there's like a bottle cap nailed to the top. And, interesting, 409. I've got a tattoo of the, I flew in the 409th Squadron, as part of the War Artist program a decade ago. It's kind of I never thought about that. Anyway, what a weird coincidence. But, you know, just something very simple. You don't need these advanced things in order to really have a rich imagination. In fact, sometimes not having those physical things can be barriers, right? When you don't have an actual airplane or pretend plastic airplane to sit inside of, then you're not limited by the way that Fisher-Price made the buttons and dials. You can make them as big or small as you want them to be, because it all exists in your mind. All right. So anyway, I just find it super fascinating, the character of Snoopy. There's been books written, the philosophy of Snoopy. Snoopy never talks in any of the Peanuts cartoons. We only ever see his thought balloons appear. So while he never communicates directly with any of the other characters, who just treat him just like a regular old dog, Snoopy clearly has a very advanced outlook and understanding of the world, probably more advanced than most of those kids. Christine says, I wonder if Peanuts had such a heavy psychological undertones because it was told by a grown man who was reflecting on his childhood through the eyes of an adult. Absolutely. 100%, Christina. I mean, I think there's interviews where Charles M. Schulz talks about that. I think his childhood, not that it was unhappy, but that he felt like very alone, and he was kind of like a I don't know, just sort of like a very introspective little boy who, even though he did do some athletics, he was kind of a bit of a loner kind of type, and so I think he was definitely looking back on his own childhood. I think there's remarks where he identified more with children than with other adults, and he partly wanted to use like these cartoons to help adults understand how complex the lives of children are and were at the time. Because the further you go back into time, like, children were not even really considered to be human beings. I mean, it sounds crazy to say now, but you can look it up online. But it's not really until the 20th century that children are, and the concept of childhood is taken seriously. That there's something to be respected and fostered about the way that kids are developing in their inner world, so there is a certain amount of the audience reading those original Peanuts cartoons who are just like, I never really thought about my son or daughter, having complex thoughts or worries about the world. Like, gosh, that's wow, I wonder what they're thinking right now. Like, for the majority of human culture, who cares what kids thought? Like, they're barely functioning, until they get to a certain age or go through a rite of passage in their teens. Then they become worth, tuning into and listening to. But beyond that, like, who cares? Kathy's there. Hi, Kathy. Just checking in for a bit. I would like to paint this one. It looks so much fun. Christine says, my son used to say our cat was playing Red Baron because, like cats do, he'd be in the backyard creating dramas with imaginary foes, like falling leaves, and basically acting like Snoopy. That is so funny. Absolutely. Totally. I'm sure anyone who's ever had a pet, communicate. I think if you've ever had a dog or a cat, you have probably found yourself at some point having a conversation with that animal, and it's kind of wild how they seem to be understanding and respond, and and sometimes, when you see a dog or a cat playing on its own, they're not just like little robots who turn on when you enter the room and then just, go to sleep, when you leave the room, right? And then there's all sorts of stuff, and kind of wondering, what on earth? How do you perceive the world? It's so fascinating. Barbara says, children were treated and dressed as miniature adults in the 19th century England. Yeah, and they would put them in the factory when they're like, they liked them small because they could get underneath the machinery and get their little fingers into the jammed cogs, and for that, kids would have all sorts of terrible injuries, and Sanga says, children should be seen and not heard, says the old saying. Yes, absolutely. I even remember that as a kid, still hearing that. Yeah. Wow. Okay. I think we could talk. Maybe we could talk about all this as we continue to paint. Let me see. Maybe just right before I move on, just speaking kind of specifically about today's painting and why I find it so interesting and fascinating. I did provide a couple of... So there's this one that we're going to paint. There is this other version I was kind of contemplating maybe also doing today, but I think it'd just be too much. One thing to note is that here I did take an image of the Red Baron and put him into the painting. I was even contemplating putting it into this one. Although technically the Red Baron never, ever, ever makes an appearance in any of the Peanuts cartoons or movies, TV shows. So this is technically not, would be non-canon, I suppose you could say. So, I also, this one here shows kind of the flak guns, those big explosions that anti-aircraft machines would be, cannons would be firing to try to shoot Snoopy down. And he's got this kind of terrified look. He's got his goggles on. So we could have done this one, but this one seems maybe more positive, more heroic. He's more confident here, and maybe if I wanted to make a painting that I want to hang around, I probably want the more heroic Snoopy rather than the more fearful Snoopy. But hey, I don't want to stop anybody from whatever painting they want to make. Yeah, as I said, Snoopy is still to this day, I think, I would say Snoopy is sort of like my spirit animal, right? I think Snoopy is maybe kind of what we all want to be. Someone who is fearless, who has endless courage, is willing to just fall down, fail gloriously in his world to attempt to kill the Red Baron. But for us, it's like someone who will fall flat on their face, get up, wipe all the mud off, and get right back in that plane and fly again, and keep kind of going through these different trials and frustrations and challenges, and is totally undeterred by whatever the universe throws at them, and maintains that kind of positive attitude, that smile. Also is someone who is essentially mute, can't really communicate with the outside world, and who yet doesn't let those barriers get in the way of whatever it is that he wants to do. He's still so he's just this super resilient character, so confident and determined. So maybe everybody aspires to the qualities of Snoopy. And of course, that's exactly how Charles M. Schulz built him. I mean, he saw Snoopy as kind of the embodiment of the person he ultimately would like to have been or be. So, yeah, fascinating. And I'm really excited to continue working on this painting, just because, yeah, it's kind of feels like a bit of a full circle from 40 plus years ago when I first got into Snoopy. Because this makes me think of Oliver Twist. Okay, I'm gonna get into painting here. Let's do that right now. Okay, so where should we go? I think we can go right to next foreground, because I don't know if I need to do any more in the background. Okay, I got about an hour before I gotta get out the door here. So now that we got our background completed, and we've got all of this white using both gesso and just regular titanium white on the canvas here. Mostly we're just going to be painting in a few little details, and then doing, probably the majority of the time is going to be spent doing the black outlines, which we can use a Posca pen with, an acrylic paint pen, or just a black paintbrush. And I'm not sure, depending on how my time goes, I might have to use Posca pen, because I can really speed up the process. So there's the canvas as it is now. Let's look at the original side by side, just so we can see what needs to be done. Yeah, my background now does look maybe darker than it could have been or should have been. Again, if I had put a little bit of white in there, that would lighten it up a little bit. But I also don't mind that really dark blue. It does sort of look like, you know, the sky as the sun is maybe already set, and that kind of seems conceptually coherent with the rest of the Snoopy verse. You know, talking about the Da Vinci Code came up during the Our Lady of Guadalupe episode. It's on TV right now. Awesome. Okay. Well, I do think maybe this... Okay, I feel 100% confident that with the painting like this, that I can paint those features right back on top. However, if you're a beginner artist, and after all, today's episode I said was a beginner painting, there's probably a few of you who are like, I don't know about that. I don't know if I'm going to be able to paint this painting from scratch, or just to fill in all those details. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to cut Snoopy out, and I'm going to retrace some of these lines. So you'll notice I didn't cut everything out because I don't need to have it. It doesn't have to be super precise. What I want to do, I was mostly just, I want to be able to kind of line up these corners of the dog house. That's important. And then kind of the outer edges of the face and nose. That looks like that's good enough. So if that's good, I'm going to tape this down. And then I'm going to, once again, I'm going to try to be as careful as possible. So maybe I'm going to put this line there. Yeah, I'm going to move that up so I can rest my hand here. You just want to be careful as you're doing this that, you know, maybe I'm going to be careful with these fingers. And that, okay, so let's just go right to the smile, nose, eyes. I'm kind of drawing lightly because it's not guaranteed that everything's going to be in the right place when I peel all this off. Let's see. Just wondering about these. You know what? That might be. That might be good enough. And if I'm a little concerned that I can't see any lines, then maybe after I've done that, I'm just going to take an HB pencil and I'm going to go around and maybe redraw in any lines that are. Let's bring this back. I would have liked there to be a bit more room for that other foot here. So can I erase using my kneadable eraser? Okay. So there's a few places here. I'm going to add a little bit more white paint. Okay, I think that's good. Let's let's just blow dry this here. Ah, the sound was off. I can't believe it. How long was that sound off for? I don't know. Darn it. Okay. Well, what I did is I used my warm red plus a little bit of white to make the color a bit more opaque. I put in just a little bit, so it's gone up slightly pastel, but not too much where it becomes pink. Putting in there to help kind of even out some of the brush strokes, because red tends to be fairly transparent. So, yeah. Okay, let's actually mute. Thank you guys for trying to get my attention. I mean, if it wasn't for you guys, I could be for another 2 hours here painting away and not have any clue what was going on or not happening. Where did my red go? Ooh, talk about vibrations. Now this, okay, so it's probably not super visible on camera, but this new layer of just pure warm red right out of the tube, right next to that blue, is just like, wow. It is. Those are two colors that are competing for my eyes' attention here, for sure. Oh yeah, especially as I see it now, as it dries, it becomes way more visible. That it's way more pinkish. Wow, that is bright. Beautiful. Electric colors. And I hope it goes without saying is if I just tried to paint that red right on top of my blue earlier on, like, I'd have to do 50 layers of that red paint. Right? Like, I wouldn't even consider just painting that red right on top of that blue without having put white there as a foundation beforehand. It would just be just creates so much busy work that it would be worth it. Okay, so what else? Basically, it's just brown, really, I guess, is the last color. So, besides black. Okay, so let's mix up a brown. I'm going to use this same color. Well, let's take our warm yellow. Let's take some warm red. So we have a fairly light brown. And then we're going to take a bit of warm blue. Mix that in there. Maybe we'll put a bit more yellow in it, just to differentiate it from the red of the. Like I think I want it more of a yellow dominant brown rather than a reddish brown, right? So that it doesn't look, because we've got a lot of red here now. And probably since we got such a dark sky, I'm going to make it lighten it up even more. In fact, let's take all of this. Okay. Now I need to blow dry that because otherwise I'm just kind of pushing paint around there. It's not really dry. So let's try that again. Let's do maybe use our small brush first this time. Once again, if you were feeling like this is not opaque enough, just add a little bit of white into this color. Again, you got to be careful. You put too much white into it, and then you're going to start getting like a skin tone that's going to start to appear. Not that that's a bad thing necessarily, but at least you'd learn how to mix a skin tone. Okay, I'm going to blow dry that. I don't know, I could be done, but maybe I want to do another layer just while I got so much extra. You know, it's something just to think about, you know, whenever I'm painting a painting that's got just a few colors in it that is, quote, a simple painting, all of that, whatever the little amount that's on here has to do a lot of heavy lifting. Now, obviously, if this is your first painting, I wouldn't worry about it. But as you get more and more experience and you go for something maybe a little bit more minimalist or something that, you know, you're demanding that the paints do more with less, and so it doesn't hurt to try to fine-tune these little things. Unless you're in a real big hurry or something. So once again, I'm just going over trying to get rid of any texture. Let's blow dry that again. Okay, I think that's probably good enough. Did I blow dry that? I think let's blow dry that. Oh, Stephanie. Oh no, Stephanie's gone for the day. Kathy's got to go. Okay, so now that I've got kind of everything in place, my last step here is really to do some black outlining. And there's a couple different ways we could go. I can mix my own black, which I think is what I'm going to do, but I just wanted you to know that another option would be to use something like a Posca pen. So a Posca pen, let me see one that's already been used, is an acrylic paint pen. Let me see, don't I have one that's open already? Okay, here's one that's open and ready to go. So a Posca pen it's just acrylic paint or acrylic ink that comes out. And we can use this to very carefully do outlines. You can see I've got a few different sizes. This one's more like a Sharpie size. Some people would actually go and use a Sharpie. I would strongly, strongly discourage you from doing that, because while it might look great the moment you finish the painting, about a week or two later, you're going to notice that Sharpie is going to start losing its light fastness, meaning it's not going to look black anymore. It's going to start looking maybe green or purplish. It might start to kind of bleed or fade into the other colors, and then you might have to do another layer of it. Sharpies just aren't archival. They're not meant for this kind of thing. They're meant for labeling boxes and stuff. And while it might do the job in the moment, you know, these Posca pens cost somewhere between $3 to $6 a piece. And if this is one of the few things on Amazon that I think you can get a good deal on. I've seen them. I bought a pack for my in-person classes, like 15 of them for like $30, which is a great deal. And so that would be my recommendation if you want something a little bit faster, or if you find the idea of doing black outlines to be, with a paintbrush, to be overwhelming and difficult. So what I'm doing here is I'm mixing my own black. I've put some cool blue, cool yellow, and warm red together, and now I'm mixing them all up. Now at the moment, this color's appearing kind of brown. And what that tells me is I probably have a bit too much red in here, or I need a little bit more warm blue in particular. Or I need a little bit more cool blue, sorry. I might have put a bit too much now. Oh, it's going to be too much. Well, sometimes it's like steering a boat. You kind of overcorrect. Oh well. Not bad. Might be a little bit on the blue side. And I'll show you here in a second one way to do this. Now you might say, why did you make so much black? I mean, you're not going to use all of that. And it's true, but especially when I'm doing something like this towards the end, and I'm going to be doing a lot of black painting, I want this paint to be nice and watery and fluid, so when I'm painting with it, it doesn't... I can have like the freedom to do lots of fun squiggly lines. I don't have to worry about it kind of starting to seize up 5 minutes after I mix it, which if I use a smaller batch might be like that. That's pretty good. In fact, let's see how close to black this actually is. I'm just going to take some of this white and mix it over here. And you can see when I add white to this black, I get a gray, which is to be expected. But if there was a little bit more red, this would kind of go into like a brownish gray. If there was a little bit too much yellow, it would go towards a kind of a greenish or yellowy brown kind of a gray. If there was too much blue, it would go towards like a greenish or maybe purplish kind of color, right? So this tells me my ratios were pretty close to perfect, if I don't say so myself. Now, I don't think I need any gray in this painting, so I'm just going to clean my brush off just to be sure. Yeah, I don't need any gray, so let's clean this off. Stephanie says, what is tempera egg paint? Do you have to make it yourself? Does it go bad? What is the advantage to use it for portrait painting? Well, you can buy tempera paint, and it's usually used like like for little kids. I'm not actually sure what is in like elementary school tempera paint today. What it is known, but I think they still sell it as tempera paint, and it's intended to be like in preschool classes. They use it because you can get it all over your face and your hands, and you can just, it very easily washes off. I mean, acrylic paint, you get it on your hands, it washes off, but I'm sure a few of you know, sometimes you're in the sink kind of scrubbing it off for a while, because acrylic paint has almost like it chemically is very similar to white glue. And you can literally glue things on a painting or a wall by just putting a little bit of acrylic paint to it. Whereas tempera doesn't have that gluing property. So you get a little bit of soap and water on it and it just dissolves and falls off. In terms of the history of paint, tempera is, like you said, it was an egg-based medium, and that's very common. Like a lot of fresco painting was done with tempera. So I can't say for certain, but I'm assuming, let's say the Sistine Chapel was done with an egg-based mixture. Michelangelo would be, visiting the farmer, getting fresh eggs, and either him or an assistant would be mixing that paint up. And eggs sound like, well, that's not going to last very long, is it? Like, eggs, when it dries, the egg yolk in particular, what's the yolk? The white stuff. Is that egg yolks, right? is a very strong, permanent. Like once it dries, it won't rot or anything. Also, a lot of old paintings are done with tempera. Christina said we need to convince him to do an Ask Me Anything episode. I have a lot of questions about art stuff. That's a good idea. Okay, we can do that. We'll schedule that in. Okay, let's get to painting. Okay, I got 30 minutes here to wrap up. I'm going to start in an area where I feel like I can play while I get my sea legs here. And so I'm not going to go right into the eyes of Snoopy to start. I'm going to play around in an area that people probably aren't going to look too closely at. And I would suggest you do the same. So that way I can kind of build up my confidence, kind of figure out if this is the right brush or not, all that kind of stuff. Now one thing is this black against the dark blue doesn't show up all that great. So it does make me think, you know what, probably a little bit of a lighter blue for the background would have been most prudent. One thing I think about like doing a Ask Me Anything thing is like Makes me a little nervous because I probably get stumped 20 times. You guys always have so many great questions. I feel like, but all in good fun, right? Maybe I should start zooming in here so you can. Okay. Make sure that's in focus, right? Trying to also not get super precise lines. You can see how kind of like wobbly these are, and that can be kind of good for some people. It gives them a little bit of leeway so they don't have to be so precise. Got too many fingers here. Man, this is the fact that I can be kind of wobbly and don't have to worry about making all perfect straight lines is kind of nice. Oops. Maybe is Mike getting too wobbly here? Oops. Oh well. Okay, so I've lost the detail for where the, I guess, ear muff or ear protector would be. But rather than just try to, I'm going to paint the things that I know, where I know the lines can go. And then I'll come back to that. On camera there. So again, this is why I was never really super worried about having messy white outlines, or getting the edges of my white areas all clean and precise, because I knew that I'd be going back over, putting this black in place, and that's just going to kind of cover up, hide any sloppy areas or whatever. Okay, so where should this guy go? Somewhere right around here, right? Oops. Ah, things sliding all over the place. Yeah. And I'm using the worst brush possible for this. It's all frayed and falling apart. So I really wish I had used a lighter blue for the background in retrospect. If you were painting this painting and you got to this stage and you're like, the background should be lighter, I would just leave it. I would leave it. I wouldn't try to lighten it. It's just gonna drive you bonkers. I guarantee you it would be way easier and look infinitely better if you just do a second version of it. I'm telling you, I know there's somebody who's going to say, no. I'm going to be the exception to the rule, and I'm going to pull it off, and I'm going to make it look awesome. I'm like, okay, go right ahead. Do whatever you want to do. But you're asking for a lot of grief. Like, it would just be so much busy work, and we would you'd see all sorts of noodly lines and stuff around. It's gonna look awful. You just have to say, okay, well, you know what, we're gonna move on, and we'll try it again next time. The same way, speaking of like cooking and pies and stuff, it's like if you're cooking something, let's say you're making cookies, and you realize you put too many raisins or something in there, or too much sugar or whatever. You could just spend another hour trying to not double the recipe, but make it 1/3 bigger, and you're spending all this time on the calculator trying to get the if I've got 1/3 too much sugar, what is the, and it's like, you know what, put them in the oven, bake those cookies. I mean, who knows, they could end up being really delicious, and then just make another batch. And maybe that sounds like first world solution to a problem. Yeah, obviously if you're starving and this is the last bit of food you've got, well, you're probably not baking cookies and apple pies, right? If you're that short on food. But for anyone who's got some options, it's just start over, do it again. No point in causing yourself anxiety. And after all, I think for most people, they want to paint or draw or do something creative or even cook, in many instances, to relieve stress and anxiety. So it's always like a good point to check in, is if you're making a painting and it's causing you stress and anxiety, then something isn't working. It could be that, every time we learn a new skill, obviously that induces some stress and frustration. That's just natural when part of the learning process. But, if you're trying to paint photorealistically, and that's your goal, and you're finding blending colors, glazing, all that stuff is just so difficult, frustrating. Well, you could spend the next 5 years of your life trying to master that technique. Or you just go, you know what? I don't know. Maybe it's just not for me. Maybe the universe is telling me I gotta be a Jackson Pollock instead of Vermeer. I don't have to. Maybe I'm meant to splatter paint rather than carefully paint. I mean, I have, in these episodes tried about as many different paint styles as I can. There's definitely, I have my own approach to painting when I'm doing my own stuff. So some of these episodes are definitely more challenging than others. Yeah, it's fun to challenge yourself, but at the end of the day, there's certain kinds of maybe approaches that I'm like, okay, I'm glad I did that, but probably not gonna be doing that very often. Uh-oh. My computer's glitching out a few times. It just looks like it's a cable or something. Okay, gotta get on my horse here. I got about 10 minutes before I gotta run out the door. Before I gotta run out the roar. Christina says, I want to learn to paint looser or more impressionistics, but it's like I have control issues or something. I want to become more comfortable with my paintings not looking realistic. Good. Okay. Well, trying to think what would be some of the episodes where we really jettisoned control. Well, I think a lot of kind of avant-garde painting, like Matisse or Impressionist paintings, can kind of maybe loosen you up a little bit. Although I do find it funny, sometimes I see people painting those Impressionist paintings which are intended to be very loose and carefree, and they get really obsessed with perfection in a style of painting that is kind of all about freedom and play. Okay, I think I need a different brush. This one is just, it's on its last legs. You know, I'm going to blow dry all of this because I got wet paint everywhere. I don't want to... It's starting to get closer to the being done here. Okay, we're almost done. I'm literally at the point where I want to do some finishing touches to wrap up. I really just want to draw some lines on the clouds and then finish Snoopy's face off. So, let's do that because I got about 10 minutes before I got to run. There's the painting original version. Let's go right to the top left corner. So this one is that there, just as a heads up. Now, I'm obviously not trying to get the exact amount of lines in and stuff. I'm just doing an approximation. I'm actually not even really looking at them. I just want to see this just to make sure I'm in the same kind of ballpark, but as long as it's close, good enough. I think ideally all of these diagonal lines are running about as parallel as possible. I can see some of mine are kind of going in slightly different directions. If I was really obsessed with getting it perfect, I would have drawn my lines out first, just to ensure the accuracy, but oh. Ah, there's one that's going in the opposite. I'm going to keep them all going in the same direction here, folks, but there you go. Maybe I should have been paying closer attention. Okay. Before I just, if there's anything I'm not super happy with this eye, I want to do the other one first. Because if I need to expand it, right, I want to know which direction I will need to expand it. I can see how now this one is looking a little bit big, a little bit wider. Okay, so I'm like, okay, well, I got to do that to this one here as well. almost feel like this could be a little bit more jittery. Like it's almost a little bit too clean that compared to some of the other lines, but you know what? That's probably not something I wouldn't recommend fiddling with that. Trying to make those lines look a little bit more organic. I think probably it's good just like that. Okay. Okay, we're here at the end of the episode. It's time to take a look at how I did compared to the original and see if there's any kind of changes or problems or things that we could have done better. So let's dive into it. Maybe quickly before I do so, just want to encourage people to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you know when these future episodes are taking place. Sometimes I decided kind of the night before that I'm going to do something. A little bit of time pops up there. Just like Barbara's saying in the chat, don't forget to like, subscribe. Supporting this channel is easy and so worth it. Thank you so much. And nice to see you, Barbara. Thanks so much for chiming in there. Okay, if you want to support the channel with a couple dollars as a donation, like $2, $3, $5, $50 million, anything in between there is greatly appreciated. You can scan the QR code on the screen, or you can enter in that web address. It'll take you to a page that looks like this, where you can safely and securely donate to support the channel. And if you want to send an e-transfer, or check in the mail, use this YouTube Super Chat, all the links are down there below. My email is on my website and the Facebook group. So if you want to contact or send an e-transfer, check, or mailing address, contact me that way. Speaking of Facebook, join the Facebook group. Take a photograph of whatever you created today, whether it's Snoopy, whether it's a painting you've done entirely on your own or based on a past episode, or even the free drawing course I did almost 6 years ago now. I still give people free advice, even if you're just starting it. I want to encourage everybody to learn how to draw and find creative ways to express themselves. That's what our Facebook group looks like. So there's the original. This is the painting we created, and there's my version of it there on the screen. Looks like there's a little bit of reflection going on up top there. Again, I feel kind of like the background is a little bit darker than it should have been. I probably could have put a little bit of white in there just to brighten that up. But all in all, I'm not too terribly upset about that. I think it kind of all worked out pretty well. Yeah, how about let's zoom in and just see how things compare. Maybe we'll go to the bottom here. Now on camera, this red that I've got here looks kind of orangey, but I'll tell you for a fact it is about as bright red as humanly possible. So those colors are actually, I would say, pretty much exactly the same in person, but it does look a little bit more on the orange side. And especially if we had done a yellow Imprimatura, that would have been really more visible. You'll also notice I squeezed a little cloud in there where there wasn't one previously, just because I felt that it kind of needed something else there. You know, maybe the lines I put on the clouds could have been a little bit thinner than what I've got there. A little more discreet, but I don't mind how they turned out. That blue not only could have been, yeah, it could have been just pure cool blue and a little bit of white, now that I see it kind of side by side. Although, again, it does appear darker on camera than it actually is. I mean, it is dark, but it's not, I feel like it looks much darker on camera there, looking at it now. Oh, let's just go to the other corner. Come on, where'd my cursor go? There we go. You'll notice that there's this the one cloud where the lines are going in the opposite diagonal direction. I don't know why that happened. It could have been me playing around in Photoshop, just rotated it, but I decided just to keep mine all going in the same direction because it might have seemed a little strange to me if there was one that was totally unlike the others. Yeah, looks good. Let's go look at Snoop's. Oh. Okay, that looks pretty good. I had a little bit of difficulty with that hand, maybe putting extra finger accidentally on the opposite side, but good enough. Same thing with the scarf. It was a little bit tricky getting those details, but good enough. And then we'll finish with Snoopy's head. Okay, we got there. We did. Oh, I didn't notice that these are black. Hey, I left them white. Okay, that's probably good, hey? So now if we zoom out, there's always something, isn't there? Well, let's zoom out a bit more, get the whole thing on there. Okay, well, thank you everyone for painting along with me and keeping me company. That one was a fun one, something I've been wanting to do probably for the last 20 years or so. Finally got an opportunity to do it, so that is very rewarding. Thank you, everyone. I hope you have a wonderful morning, evening, afternoon, wherever you are on our beautiful planet. Just know that just looking at art, talking about art, thinking about it, and making it is even better, but is helping to make your family, your community, our society, our world better, more positive, safer places for us all to live. Just imagine if all of our leaders took an art class or a music class, a dance class, and found creative, positive ways to express themselves as opposed to starting wars and killing people. Right? So that's the world I want my daughter to live in. So thank you for helping to make her world a better place. We'll see you again, maybe even tomorrow morning. I'm not sure. I got a few ideas, but we'll see. Otherwise, take care, everybody. We'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.